this week, actually, during the week, what we were looking at was direct and absorption costing. Well, we looked at a whole lot of things in terms of methods of measuring your product cost. We looked at a brief touch on standard costing. We looked at normal costing, where you have to come up with a predetermined rate for your overheads. And that's what led us to direct and absorption costing, where we're looking at how do you treat your production cost in terms of under absorption costing. That's where you put in your fixed overheads, and under variable costing statement, your cost of sales, it's only variable costs. And we saw that under absorption costing, you determine your gross profit before you go to your profit. And under your variable costing statement, you look at contribution, and your fixed overheads are treated as expenses under period cost. That's a brief summary of what we went through last week. I would like us, with that being said, to look at a question. I'd like you guys to attempt it, because as I've mentioned, each tutorial, it's more of discussion, you guys talking and us helping each other on certain principles. So I wanted us to start off the class, given what we covered, just to do another question for direct and absorption costing system. Statements, just to make sure that we brush off on those principles again. Okay, right. So I'll read the question with you all, and then I'll give you the minutes. The minutes for how long you should attempt the question. You attempt it, then after attempting, we discuss. We look at the solution together, so that at least you'll be fully participating in this class, right? Question 5 talks about the company Able Limited, and they give us information with the month ended 31 July for 2013 and 31 August 2013. So it's 2 different months. So for the first month, being July, they tell us that they made sales of 900, and this is the total cost, 21,600. Then what they produced for the month, so this is sales, and what they produced for the month was actually 1,000. So that means that they have a closing inventory for that month of 100. Finished goods units at the beginning of the month, it's 0. So they didn't have any opening inventory. The variable cost per unit, production cost per unit is 5.40 Rand. The variable selling and administration cost per unit is 3 Rand. The fixed production cost, they give you the total cost of 100. The fixed selling and admin cost, it's 3,100. Okay, so you have your fixed costs, you have your variable costs, no matter how they are, manufacturing and manufacturing, and you have the production and also the sales volumes and also the sales figure. Then we go to a new month, which is August. So they tell us the selling price per unit here. So they don't give you the total value, but they give you the selling price per unit, and it is 25 Rand. The sales for the month, it is 800, and the production for the month, it's 900. So also in this instance, there's also a closing stock, but you have to calculate it. Variable production cost per unit is 6.50 Rand, and the selling and admin cost per unit, it's 3 Rand. Okay, Your fixed portions, your fixed production cost, they give you the value, 5,994. The fixed selling and admin, they give you 3,100. Okay, so this question seems a bit straightforward. Let's go to the additional information. So for additional information, the company uses first in, first out method to value their stock. Remember last time when we did the question, they were using weighted average, but here they're saying first in, first out. The increase in fixed production cost is due to, so here they're telling you here, because our fixed cost production cost, if you look at it now, last month it was 4.6, but then now it's 5.9. So you can see that there is an increase because it's only over a month. So now they're telling you that the increase in that fixed production cost is due to a new rental agreement, hence the fixed cost changed. There were no stock losses during any of the 2 months, so that's great. Then what are you required to do? You need to prepare the income statement for the month of August, not July, August, according to the direct costing method and the absorption costing method. So those are the first two questions. And the format of the two income statement must clearly illustrate, meaning you must show what the difference are between these two methods. So it already tells you that the income statement don't look the same. So make sure that presentation-wise it shows what a person can look at the two statement and see that, oh yeah, it makes sense. That line item is not in this income statement, but it's in this income statement. So show the difference between the two methods in terms of how you put your income statement. And then B asks you to reconcile in profits, reconcile the difference in profits according to the two methods. So A asks you to prepare income statement according to these two methods. And then B asks you to reconcile the difference between the profit that you will get under direct costing and the profit that you'll get under absorption costing method. All right. So let me just get calculator here. So this is how many marks? It's 8 plus 10 plus 3. That gives you 21. You multiply it by 1.2 to know how many minutes you need to spend on this question. So it says 25 minutes. So that's what I'm going to give you guys. We are all on board. You guys can see the screen. I'm not going to show this part, but you already know what is required of you. You're required to do the direct costing method and absorption costing method. You're required to do an income statement according to those two methods. And then B asks you to reconcile the profits. So I will not show this portion, but what's important, it's this one. So I'm going to give you guys 25 minutes to attempt this question. Please attempt it. As I always mention, this is a safe space for you guys to practice, because I know that some are working, others you are studying other subjects. There's a lot going on during the week. Let's make sure that we make the most out of these classes. So attempt the question. I'm going to give you guys 25 minutes to prepare and do the question fully. Do it, write as quick as you can, and then we come back, we mark together. Nah? So take this as a practice question for what we've learned or what we went through. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself. You guys can see the screen. You can see the question. Your 25 minutes starts now. Okay, so time is up. Now you're getting talking part. How did you guys find the question? Did you guys finish? This is where you guys speak.
I couldn't finish.
Where did you end off?
On absorption costing, I ended on when I was meant to subtract the variable selling and admin.
Okay. Okay. Okay, at least you pushed a bit. Others?
I finished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you finished, Romulimo. Well done.
Thank you.
And others? Okay, Stain says that was not able to finish. He was also on absorption costing. Cool. Ayanda, Kathy.
I didn't
Ayanda,
finish.
yes.
I didn't finish.
Where did you end off?
At absorption costing, ne? And then at variable cost.
So same place as Tribile. Okay. And how did you guys find the question? Where was it tricky?
Maybe if I may come in, I think the question wasn't that tricky. I always battle with the reconciliation of the profits at the end.
Okay, cool. That one you can solve it quickly. So you'll see. All right, so let's look at the solution now. We'll look at part A, which is asking you the direct costing method. Right. So first of all, before you attempt the question, you always have to start with your income statement structure. How will it look like? Right? You know that before you start putting in the answers, you have your structure, you put in your sales, you know that there should be variable production costs, opening, variable, then your closing stock. Then you know that you have to put in your, because under direct costing method, remember contribution says that you have to take into account all variable costs. So you have to put that portion of saying that, okay, I saw the selling and admin, that's variable. You put it there. Then either marginal income or contribution, you put it there. Then your fixed cost, then your net income. So I say plan your answer by putting the structure before you get into the calculation. If you can even move to absorption costing to say, how does it look like in terms of structure? You put it down. Income statement, you have your sales. Now you have your cost of sales that is made up of opening stock, variable production, and fixed, less your closing stock. Then you have a gross profit. Then you less your sales and admin, variable, fixed, then your net income. So always start with the structure of how your income statement will look like before you start calculating. Because sometimes your calculation, it's where you just doubting yourself. You don't know whether how to apportion or what you need to do. I'm just giving you a heads up. Then thereafter, I'm giving you exam technique. So exam technique, a question like an income statement, always start with how will it look like, the structure, without putting in the answers. You put the structure nicely. Then your second attempt would be, which cost am I given? Given means that I don't need to do this calc. The number is as is from the question. I don't have to manipulate it. I just have to put it in. So your things like under direct costing method, your production cost, your fixed cost, it's given. It's this 5994. So it's a given amount. You don't need to calculate. It's just a matter of positioning it, because once you put out the structure, you know that you need fixed cost. What's under fixed cost? I've got production, I've got sales admin. I don't need to do a calc. I just have to put it as is. Already you've earned your 2 marks before you even start calculating, if you get what I mean. So what I'm saying is start with the easy marks, because it builds confidence also inside your brain to say, okay, I'm on the right track. At least no matter what happens, I got my 2 marks here. I've identified my fixed cost. Then you start going on your sales, right? Sales, it's also an easy mark. They gave you, you ask yourself, what am I given? Okay, sales, they gave me the selling price per unit and they gave me the sales for the month. So that one is straightforward, 800 multiplied by 25. You put it straight there, 20,000, you're good to go. Then because you have your structure in place, you go to the next point to say, all right, what would be my opening stock? Do I even have an opening stock? Then you go back to the question. You ask yourself, what would be my opening stock? Okay, opening stock, that means that it's from the previous month. Or in other instances, from the previous year. So it's a previous period, right? So that would mean that in the previous month, that would be their closing stock. And for this month, it would be my opening stock. So you go here, you start looking, all right, what information do I have here for July? Because I'm in August, so I go here. So they don't have any opening stock from the previous. So it's 0. What did they produce for that month? The 1,000 units, all right. And how many did they sell? They sold 900. So that means that I have 100, right? So you've got this 100 Rand going on. 100 units, which are your opening stock from the previous month. So you say 1,000 minus 900. All right. Under what method am I in? I'm in the direct costing method. That means that I'm only thinking about variable cost, variable production cost. So last month, what were their variable production costs per unit? Because I've got the opening stock. So that means that even the cost, they need to be linked to the previous period, not this month, but the previous one. So you look here, they gave me the information for variable production cost per unit, which is 5 Rand 40. So you put it times 5 Rand 40, it's the 100, multiply by that, then you get your number. Did anyone have an issue with the opening stock part? This is where you guys speak. Did you, or was it fine? If it's fine, just say you're good. Did you guys struggle with this portion, the opening stock part?
Yes, ma'am. I had a problem with that. And I see you've got brackets, then open brackets there.
What do you mean?
You see on the I didn't put in the brackets, the outside brackets. I just did 1,000 less 100, then multiply by 540.
But did you get 540 at the end?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, it's fine. I think this is just to show that it's all in one, but I don't think that you'll be penalized for not putting these outside brackets. But it's 1,000 minus this, it's in your brackets, then you multiply by 5 Rand 40. I think that's just etiquette or presentation. More than that, as long as you got this right.
Okay.
Cool. You're identifying, what's important is identifying what my opening stock units are and what the price is. So identifying that the cost has to be variable production cost, that's a win. So I think here the opening brackets and the close, it's more of presentation. It's just mathematic etiquette of how you present certain things. What must law, just to show that you're taking that into account. And then, so after identifying your opening stock, you know that you need to, because this is part of your structure, right? What I'm talking about is just additions of calculation, but your structure, your presentation, your framework would say sales less variable production. There will be opening stock. In some instances, there won't be any opening stock. You will then put 0 here. But presentation show that you know that there should be an opening stock, right? Then the next one is variable production cost. So in this instance, now we're looking at the current month's production. So how many units were produced for August? It's 900. Okay, so I've got 900 units. And what were my, because it's under direct costing method, what were my variable production costs for this month? They gave it to you 650. So 650 multiplied by the 900, you get your 5.8. Straightforward, I hope. Did you guys have any issue with finding or determining the variable production? Because it's straightforward. You just have to think about your current production unit and the current variable production. If you have any questions, you can then remember I can't see your hands, so just unmute yourself and talk. Okay. So these two costs, they give you the cost available, right? So it's this 6.3. You add your 540 plus the 5.8, it gives you 6,390. Now, because it's first in, first out, you don't need to apportion. Because remember, under weighted average, you had to apportion because you're weighting the cost. But under first in, first out, we use the last cost that you're working with, which is the current period's cost. Right, so wait, before we go there, less closing stock, you start again. What units are there for my closing stock? So it's 200. You ask yourself, how much did we produce this month? What was our opening stock? Remember, opening stock is, let's start here. I hope you guys can see my calculator. So you start saying, what were the first stock that I will probably sell? So you firstly think of your opening stock, which you calculated was 100, plus how many did we produce? We produced 900. So that means that I had 1,000 stock available for me to sell. And out of that 1,000, how many did we sell? It's 800. So that means that my closing stock is 200. So that's where you get your 200 units. Then still, it's under direct costing method. And here I'm working with my first in, first out. So that means that I'm working with the last cost that we had to incur, which is the 650. So using 650 and you get your closing stock. Did you guys struggle with this portion or are we good to go for closing stock?
We go to go.
Awesome. So you guys see the difference between how you calculate your closing stock for direct costing method, sorry, because you'll see under absorption costing is a different story. But let's move on. So it's straight, it's variable. There you go. Then now you have your costs there. You have your costs there, your variable production costs. It's 509, which is the 6.3 minus the 1.3. You get your 5. So 20 minus 5. Now you have this amount. Then after having this amount, you have to remember that contribution says that you have to take into account both your production, your variable production cost, and also your variable non-production cost. So a part of those non-production costs are variable selling and admin. So there you go. This one is also straightforward. What do I need? I need for sales, I need the sales units, not production, but the sales units. And I also need to know what is the cost per unit. They gave you the cost per unit is 3 Rand. So it's 800 multiplied by 3 Rand, then you get your 2.4. And that's where now you come to your contribution income, marginal or contribution income. Then thereafter, you now, because it's under direct costing method, you have to now consider that, oh, direct costing method says my fixed cost now needs to be treated as an expense. So there you go, your fixed cost. And remember, if you started your answering of this question by putting in these numbers, you don't need to now go and look. You've already put it in because they are given. Then that means that after getting your contribution, you less your fixed cost, you get your net income. That's how quickly you can go about this question. And it's 8 marks. So that means that according to the calculation, you take 8 marks. I'm just showing you how exam technique works. 8 marks, you multiply it by 1.2. That means that you were supposed to spend 9 minutes, 60 seconds. But let's say it's 9 minutes. You had to spend 9 minutes on part A only. So it means that part A, direct costing method, you should have done it quickly so that you can go to absorption costing method. You don't spend most of your time on this one. You go to the next one, which is 10 marks. So you also take your calculator to see how many more minutes am I supposed to spend on this question. So there you go. It's 12 minutes. So that's how you need to plan. Start thinking so that you can think on your feet, think of easy marks. How quickly can you attempt questions? Because you cannot afford to always say, I ended off at this portion, I couldn't finish. Certain things like your net income, you get principal marks for just being aware that you have to take your contribution less your fixed cost. So it doesn't have to be the most correct answer, but you can just do the calculation. Say 12 minus 9, roughly where am I? Roughly what would be the estimated net income? Not to say 12, 510 minus 9094, because you're working against time. But you need to acknowledge that here it's a sum of these two. So let me put a number quickly and go to the next question. All right, so I'm just teaching you how to make sure that you answer all the questions under time, because most of the time students, they know the knowledge, but the problem, they don't have exam technique as to how to attempt quick questions and answer as fast and as possible, right? So let's go to the next one. That was direct costing, straightforward, I think. Let's go to absorption costing method. Cool. So I said, before you start absorption costing method, the income statement, start writing your framework so that you know where to start, right? And I'd say here, the only thing that you can put in is saying that under my structure, I'll have gross profit and sales admin. I'll have my fixed portion here. So I'll put it straight because it is given. Given means I don't need to calculate it. Another number that you didn't have to calculate that you can put in directly, it's your sales. Because guess what? Your sales, no matter the method, stays the same. So it's still your 800 times 25, which is 20,000. So you don't even have to waste time to say 800 times 25. You can say C calc from 1. So you are showing that reference. You've done this calculation before and it's under part 1. So just say C calc part 1. Then you put your 20,000 there. You've saved time. Now you get to the nitty-gritties where Now you have to calculate something like even your variable selling and admin. It's straightforward. You've already calculated this number. You have it on top there on part A. So I'm just saying in terms of easy marks, you also say see part 1. Then you put in your 2.4. Do you guys see what I mean by saying already you have how many marks? You've got 3 out of 10. Without even wasting time, you've already calculated. You don't have to think twice. Now you know that I just need to now struggle a bit here, but I've got 3 out of 10 than saying I've got nothing. I got stuck here, or the time was up and I was on this section. I couldn't finish. So see new ways of attempting questions, but you get to learn and know how to do this when you do more questions and you do it under exam conditions. You sit down, you time yourself, you start now seeing how quickly can you answer questions. So that by the time you get into the exam, you're not practicing in the exam, you already have a way of answering questions. So that's why I always make sure that you guys start practicing in these sessions so that by the time you get to the exam, you have a way of attempting questions and you make sure that you answer all the questions. Okay. So part of your structure cells that you must put in your cells, we mentioned that you say CCalc. Make sure you put your reference net. Don't just put 20,000. Say CCalc under 1, or others might want to calculate it again, put it there, it's fine. So you put your sales. Then the next one is that you then need to do your cost of sales. See how different it looks from, remember I told you that you must illustrate the differences. Under direct costing method, they say less variable production costs. And under absorption costing, it says less cost of sales. So that's also something to note. Okay. Your opening stock in this instance, let's go here, is 10,000. So the 10, that means that it's the total costs of both your variable and also your fixed production cost. So it's the 4.6 plus the other amount, which would mean that it's the variable production cost of your previous month. So this 10,000 is that variable production cost from last month and also the fixed portion of last month. And then you have to apportion it because remember it's mixed. So how you would apportion it, saying 100, because we've identified that the closing stock from last month was 100, and we've identified that the production units for last month was 1,000. So you say 100 over this, multiply by the 10,000, it gives you 1,000. Did you guys have an issue with your opening stock? So I'm saying the 10,000, it is made up of the 4.6 production cost from last month, this 4.6, plus the difference between that would be your variable cost per unit. So that would mean that it's the 5.40. Let's see, 5.40 times the 5.4. So let's do this. So the 10,000, how did they get the 10,000? We understand that, okay, cool, it's 5.40. So okay, let's start by saying this. Your opening stock, we know that you have to take the costs that your previous month, right? And under absorption costing, we know that it's variable production and your fixed production cost. So what were your previous month variable production cost? it's the 5 Rand 40. There's 5 Rand 40 here, times the number of production for that month. Remember, they didn't have an opening balance at the time, so that means that it's 1,000. It's 5.4. We all agree. So previous month's variable production cost was 5.4. So now I need the total cost. So it's the variable production cost. I now need to add the fixed because we are under absorption costing. So they gave it to me. It's 4.6. So do you see the 10,000?
Yes, ma'am, I see it now.
Now, after taking that 10,000, I still need to get what was that portion that was allocated to my closing stock. So you take this 10,000, you divide it by the number that was produced, which was the 1,000. Then you multiply it by the 100, which is the closing stock. Then you get your 1,000. Are we all together? So you took the total cost, you divide it by the 1,000, you get cost per unit, you multiply by the 100, then you get the 1,000. All together. So what we're showing here is to say that we know that the costs under absorption costing, they include variable and fixed production costs. So you had to go and calculate and see, all right, so what did they give me? Always start by saying, what did they give me? Because that gives you confidence to know what you need to look for. So you start by saying, okay, what did they, I need total production cost, meaning both fixed and variable. What was I given? I was given the fixed production cost, so already got the 4.6. That means that you need to determine the variable portion. What did they give me under variable production? They give me the cost per unit, 5.4, and they gave me the production for the month, which was 1,000. So that multiplied by that, that gives me the total variable. I add my fixed, that's my total cost. Then you say, all right, I still need to have the portion allocated to my opening stock. Then you do the portion method, then you get your 1,000. Done. Next one. So now we've covered the opening stock. We're still under absorption costing. I need to find my total production cost for this month. And my total production cost includes your variable and your fixed. So you start by saying variable production cost. Did they give it to me? No, they didn't. But what do I have that I can use to calculate? I have my cost per unit, which is the variable production cost per unit, and the production for that month. So it's the production units, 900 times 650, straightforward, 5.8. Done. Now I need to determine my fixed production cost. Fine. Did they give it to me? They did. So you put it straight in there. 5.9. Any questions thus far? Before we get to less closing stock. Straightforward, no? Then you go to less my closing stock because I got the cost available. Now I need to calculate my closing stock. Just trying to see something here. Just a sec, guys. Just want to understand something here. 5850. Oh, I see what they did here. So it's 5850 plus 5. Sorry, why is it? Sorry. It's 5850 plus 5994. Cool. Sharp. So I need to now determine my closing stock. You've already calculated what your closing stock per unit is. It's 200. And remember, it's first in, first out. So that means that you're only looking at the cost of the last. You don't include your opening stock. While as under your weighted average, remember this number, you would use what? The 12, not the 11. But because it's first in, first out, you use the last production cost, which is this 11,884. And how you get it, you take your variable production plus the fixed production, it gives you the 11,884. Then you divide it by the number of units for that specific month, which is current month, and you divide it by a 900. You get the cost per unit, then you multiply by the 200. And that gives you your closing stock. Any questions on this principle? On how you get your closing stock? And this is under first in, first out.
Yeah, no, please, just one more time with the with what you're dividing the 200 over. I get the 11,000, but just the 200 in the other part.
Okay, so the 11,884, you saw how it's calculated, you agree. But that 11,884 is based on the 900 units, what we produced for this month, not the previous month situation. We're looking at the current month cost, which is 11,884, and that was incurred for the 900, what we produced for this month. So what you want to do is to get the cost per unit, right? So you do what? 11,844, and you divide it by, because these are the costs, this is what we've incurred for the 900 units that we produced for August. So it makes sense that you divide it by what it was incurred for, the 900 units, then it's 18 Rand, 16. Right? That's the cost per unit, the total full cost per unit for this month. You multiply it by the 200 units, which is the closing stock. So you get your 2.6. I'm doing it this way. This is a long way. What they're doing here is just to say you apportion 200 divide by 900, which is the same thing. It's just that here, then you multiply by 11,844. There you go. So this is apportionment. But if you look at it, you're saying 11,844 divided by 900, you get cost per unit, you multiply by the 200. That's what you're doing. Or you're saying 200, the closing stock, over 900, which is the current month's production, multiply by the current cost, which is 11.8. It gives you the same answer. I was trying to explain it to say you are trying to get the cost per unit for this month, which is 11,884. You divide it by the 900, then you multiply by 200, you get 2.6. Do you understand, Tawand?
Yes, teacher.
Wow. Okay. Okay, cool. Any questions? Others? Kumulimo, Ayanda, Kathy, saying, are we all on board? Ebile?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but you see the difference as to how closing stock under cost, under first in, first out, how we treat it versus under weighted. You weighed all the cost. They were going to take 12.8, and this 900 was going to be 1,000, because you have to take into account that 100 and this 900, because we weighting all the costs. That was this week's question that we did, and it was one of the October exams that we did. And this is first in, first out. First in, first out, you use the current production costs. Okay, I'm done with that one. So you got your closing stock. need NB that you show that, all right, now I've got my cost of sales. So sales minus cost of sales gives me gross profit. Even with gross profit, if you feel like time is not on your hand, you have to make an assumption to say, okay, fine, 12 minus 2, that's 10. So 10 point something. You put the number there, you go to your gross profit, you sum it to say, okay, 20 minus the 10, how much will it be? You make that assumption, that's your sum. Then you get to your sales and admin. Remember, you started with this one, so that means that you've got time. And now you can say 9.7 minus that, it's around 4.2. So you get your net income. What I'm saying is that fight to get the easy marks, your principal mark, to note that at the end, I need to get to my net income. At the end, I need to show that there's a gross profit amount. I need to show that there's a contribution amount to get those easy marks, guys. So as you can see, now it leads us to the next one. My net income under direct costing method, it's different from my net income under absorption costing. My direct one, it's lesser than my absorption one. Now a question comes, they tell you to reconcile between the two income statements. This is the part where someone said that they struggle with this one. So even this reconciliation between the two income statements, it has a framework. Everything has a framework. You will see as you do more questions, everything has a framework. So I always say, always put your framework because it helps you and guides you. What you need to calculate, right? So the framework for reconciling the two income statements, it's always starting with show the net income between the two methods. So you always say, okay, that means I need net income under my direct costing method. I need net income under my absorption costing method. Okay? You put it there because you've calculated. That's why I was saying that it's very important that you get to the amount of your net income. Even though it might not be too correct, but at least get the estimation right. So you take the amount from what you've calculated. Under direct costing is 3.4. Under absorption, it's 4.2. So we are trying to reconcile this 872 to say, where does this come from? Reconciliation means that you are breaking down the movement, right? So now, where would this movement be evident? You say, all right, 872, that's what you're trying to reconcile. Where will it be coming from? Okay, first of all, it will be coming from my opening stock and my closing stock. That's where this 872 will be coming from. It will be from my opening stock and my closing stock. Okay, then they ask you, under opening stock, what was my opening stock under direct costing method? What was my opening stock under absorption costing method? You take it from your income statement. Under direct costing method, it was 540. Under my absorption cost, it was 1,000. Okay, what's the movement between the two? 1,000 minus 540, it's 460. All right, you still haven't shown the reconciliation, so you got 460. You go to closing stock. My closing stock under direct costing method, it was 1.3, while as my closing stock under absorption costing, it is 2.6. So the movement between the two is 1.3. So when you take this 1.3, you minus this 460, you get to this 872. That's how you reconcile. Because what we're saying is that absorption costing takes into account both variable and fixed production costs, while as direct costing method only takes into account variable production cost. So the minute this the reason why my net income under these two methods would be different it's when I have my opening and closing stock. So those would be your reconciling items. So to answer this question, framework is to say, okay, identify firstly that my net income is not the same. Show us your net income under direct costing and absorption costing. Show us the movement. Then thereafter, show us the reconciling items, which would be your opening and your closing stock. Show us the amounts under this according to the different methods and the movement. Then your movement between the two would be the reason why you have this difference. Any question on that? I know most of you didn't even get to this part, but you see how when you have your exam technique intact, this 3 marks should be easy for you to get. It's 3 marks. Any questions on this?
Sorry, ma'am. So basically, what you are saying is that the difference between the two is caused purely by the type of method that you'd be using to calculate.
Yeah, but most important is your opening and your closing stock. Because if you remember, during the week, I did ask you, I was saying, what is the difference between absorption and cost? Why would my income under absorption costing be more than the net income under direct costing method? And we said it's because of this opening and closing stock, what you take to your balance sheet. Because under absorption costing, there's fixed and variable cost. So that means that you are taking a bulk of your cost to your balance sheet as opposed to direct costing. We spoke about this. So yes, basically the difference between the net income under these two methods, it comes from your opening and your closing stock, because under absorption costing, you're taking bulk of your cost to the balance sheet because it will include both variable and fixed. Whereas under direct cost, you're only accounting for the variable portion.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And this question can come as a calc. Sometimes they ask you to discuss as to what is the difference between absorption costing and direct costing method. So you should be able to articulate that the difference, it results from when you have an opening and closing stock. Because if these two are not there, your net income would be the same. There won't be any reconciliation that you have to do. These amounts would be the same. But once you have opening stock and closing stock, best believe your net income won't be the same, and your absorption cost will always be higher than the net income under direct costing.
Okay.
So, moral of the story for this is to say, always know the income statement. Always know your income statement method. Sorry, someone is saying their network is not good. Okay, cool. So I'm saying always know the difference of your frameworks. How is the income statement of direct costing? How does it look like? So have your framework intact of saying, when I say intact, know it by head before you even get to these numbers. Know how to write it quickly. It's always the same. So you'll know under framework, under direct costing, how would my income statement look like? Under absorption costing, how would my income statement look like? To the T, know it to the T, like even this part, know it to the T. Then thereafter, when you're attempting such a question, always start with the easy marks. Always start with the easy marks. put in the easy marks, what you are given. Note, write it quickly as you can. Then go to the direct questions where you don't need to apportion, you don't need to minus, it's straight. So stuff like your sales, put it in quickly. Then that's when you can start saying, okay, opening stock, oh, what does the cost, what? Now you have to start thinking. You put it in. Know how your production cost under first in, first out, and also weighted average, because it affects your closing stock. Then always know that you always have to come up with an answer for your contribution and your net income. Always. So put it in as you write. Because your next question, if your recons is required, that's where those sums will come into play. Know the framework of how to do this recon. Remember, we are just trying to understand why would our net income be different. So show that variance, then always show that it's coming from your opening stock and your closing stock, and show the amounts under both. And then you would have this movement. And this movement, remember that it only comes when you have your opening and your closing stock. If they are not there, your net income would be the same. So my task or ask is to say, do another question for direct and absorption cost. See how differently they ask questions. Time yourself. And then if you're still struggling, then you know that you need to go back and see, where exactly am I struggling? Where am I not getting the concept? And also, can you articulate what, if someone asks us the difference between absorption and costing, can you write it down? Because sometimes they don't ask you in terms of doing this calc. Sometimes they say you must discuss. So I always say that each topic, always find 3 different ways that they ask the questions. That means that do at least 3 questions under exam technique and write it down. After you write it, take a break, come back, mark yourself. See where are you going wrong. Learn a framework on how to attempt the question in 3 different ways. Then you are good to go to the next unit to learn another topic. Okay. But direct and absorption costing, you guys need to be able to do it with your eyes closed. Just be able to do it well. So we've already covered 2 different ways that they ask it. We've done one where it was under weighted average. Today we looked at one where it was under first in, first out. And I told you that it affects your closing stock, how you calculate it. Then you now need to find another question where it's asked differently. Then you should know, you should close your direct costing method. Direct and absorption, you know how to do it. Then you move on to the next one. Okay. Any questions before I move on direct costing, because we are done with this topic? Yes, so unit 3, just briefly touches on it. Then it's unit 11 that actually speaks on ABC. Cool. This is unit 11. Cool. So ABC, these are your methods. Sorry, let me just reduce this, too big. Cool. So ABC, this is your method of apportioning production overheads. Okay, so what it means is that, how are your overheads? Overheads are normally your fixed overheads. How are these overheads apportioned to the units that you've produced? Okay, so sorry. things like your rent, your insurance, they normally remain the same, regardless of your level of production. So how do we know, let's say you are within a factory, you're producing tables, you're a furniture shop, so you've got tables, you've got sofas, you've got mattresses, you've got, you name it, right? So you've got rent. So this rent money, this rent expense, how would you apportion it to your products? Because if you can think about it, there's a certain, I wouldn't say department, but there's a certain space that is allocated to making tables. The other space is used for making your sofas, so on and so forth. So when you have this, let's say it's around 10,000 per month, how would you apportion for this cost? I'm putting it to you guys just so that you can just start thinking. How would you apportion this 10,000 that I'm speaking about? I've got 10,000. I've got someone who's working on tables, because remember, each and every single cost needs to be allocated to my product. How would you go about apportioning that 10,000? When I'm producing one section, they are doing tables, the other section is they are doing sofas. How would you allocate it? I'm asking you guys because you are doing management accounting.
Direct materials needed for the sofas.
Kathy, remember I said your rent. We're not talking about variable cost. I'm talking about fixed. So rent, your rent, not the material, but the rent. My rent is 10,000. I've got a section where they are doing tables, and then I've got a section where they are doing sofas. How would you suggest that we allocate that 10,000?
We divide it according to the space that
All
they
right.
take up.
Okay, so yes, that's another way of looking at it. I like that one. So you're saying, according to the space, how much space does the people who are making table actually use? Because rent normally goes with the space, right? Even wherever you live, if you are paying rent, they always say a 2-bed apartment, it would be, let's say, 7.4. While as if it's a 1-bed, it would be 5,000. I'm making a silly example, but yeah, do you guys understand? So already that indicates that it is judged according to the space that you consume. Am I correct by saying that? So space or size would make sense. Some might say according to the units that you produced, meaning how many tables did you produce for that month? Then they just divide it like that. You say according to the units produced, that's how much they will charge you. So what would happen is that one would be under the traditional costing method, and the other, the one that not every, I think, I'm sorry if I said it wrong, would suggest that she said,
You butchered my name. No, never.
No, never. Askise. I also get otherwise when people say the wrong. So, so one would be according to space or size. One being the traditional would be according to the units that you've produced. What people normally say is that traditional costing method, that's like an umbrella one. Umbrella one means that whatever that you guys produced, I'm charging you that. But other people, because that's where you're saying 10,000 divided by the total number of furnitures that you guys produce. So they'll take, let's say, under the ones that did tables, they did 50, and then the sofa department, they also did 50. So under traditional costing method, they'll say 10,000 divided by the 100 units that we produce. That would be your cost per unit. So let's see that. So here it is. So it would be 10,000 divided by, under the tables department, they did 50, and under the sofas, they did 100. So I'll just say 150 in total. Do you guys follow? So it's 100 plus the 50. So they'll say cost per unit, meaning for me to apportion this rent, it will be 60, let's say 67 rand, 67 per unit. So the department with the table will have 67 multiplied by the 50 units that they produced, meaning it's around 3.3. And then the ones with the sofa, it will be 67 multiplied by the 100, which is 6.7. That's how they would apportion that fixed overheads, right? But if you see from the example that we did, nah, the table department got a lesser portion of that rent money. They're only going to pay 3.3. But the sofa department, they're going to spend, they're going to incur 6,700. Do you guys see now? That means that the sofa is taking the bulk of that cost because of the units that they produced for that month. Right? But now, if we take ABC space. So let's say now, from the example, please follow this example because I just came up with it. So now, let's say the table department actually uses 1,000 per square meter. And the sofa department, they actually use 500 per square meter. So now, let's see how would that change. So 10,000 divided by, it's 1,000 square meter plus the 500. So that's 1.5. My cost per unit now is actually 6 rand 0.7. So 6 rand 0.7 times, under the table, they're using 1,000 square meter. That means that now you see how it swings. They now have the larger portion of the rent, which is 6.7. And then the sofa department, I said they use 500 square meter. They now have the 3.3. So do you guys see the difference between how using traditional costing method can be so different from when you're using ABC, when we look at the cost driver? That sometimes traditional costing method, what it does when you use units produced, the original one, where we're saying that side they produced this amount of tables, this side they use that, it could end up taking a department that is profitable. It can make them go under, where you end up saying, I'm no longer producing sofas because, hey, I end up having to pay so much fixed costs. So it doesn't make sense for me to continue to produce sofas. Well, as ABC says that let's look at the cost driver. Let's look at what actually drives this cost. What is the best cost driver? Right? Now when you're looking at it, changes the whole. Because now actually you must continue producing sofas because they actually use less of the space and I can make a profit out of it. While as tables, now tables are actually taking most of the space and we were not allocating these costs correctly. Do you guys see the difference between traditional costing method versus ABC? ABC looks at the cost driver, what actually drives the cost, while as traditional just looks at the number of units that are produced. They use an umbrella method. They don't look at what actually drives the method. So these things could vary. It's departments, it's assembly. We try look at what is the process, what actually drives this cost. What are they actually doing within this department or within this process? Because we're no longer looking at volume based, at what drives the cost. That's ABC. Any questions? Because when you try to use ABC, it helps you to apportion cost correctly as opposed to fixed overhead. So some of the activities that are happening, because ABC stands for activity-based costing, you have to look at the activity that attracts this pool, then identify the cost driver. So some of the activities that attract the cost would be machine setups. So setting up a machine in a factory, your driver would be the number of setups that are being done. That's how you will allocate your cost. Some of the activities is materials orders. You look at the number of orders that are being done. Quality control inspections, you look at the number of inspections that are being done. That's how you will allocate your cost correctly to those products. Instead of just saying how many units were produced, because there's just so much activity that are happening within the cost that you have to go and identify it. And that's what ABC requires of you, to identify the cost activity. Then you can then identify your cost driver. So maybe let's look at an example, another example. The one that I was doing, it was too high level, but it helps you to just get an understanding of how to go about it. So, example that we're looking at, it's example 3.9 from your learning unit. Umti Limited manufactures, they have 3 products, okay? So they've got product K, product L, product M. And during March, 24 quality control inspections were carried out. So, 24 quality inspections were carried out for product K, and then for product L, it was 22, and for product M, it was 34. The total cost overheads collected in the activity cost pool for quality control inspections was 80,000. So you always have the total cost, right? Because they don't look specifically for the product. Inspections at the end of the day, your invoice, it's 80,000. So now the question is, how do I apportion this overhead? When you're using activity-based cost, which is ABC, you will allocate it the following way. So the overhead recovery rate for this cost pool would be as follows. You take that 80,000 that I was talking about, you divide it by the number of inspections. So what are the total inspections? You take the 24, the 22, the 34. So that would be 80 inspections. So 80,000 divided by 80, it gives you 1,000 per inspection. Then how you apportion it, you take the 1,000 that you just calculated, because it's the cost per inspection, you multiply it by the number of inspection relative to each product. Then now you can see that actually product M is the one with the highest, but it's 80. But this way is the correct way of apportioning your overhead by looking at the activity, the cost activity, and also the cost driver. Then that's when you'll be able to apportion that 80,000 that we need to allocate to the specific cost pool. Because, product. This helps you guys to be able to correctly allocate, because when you don't correctly allocate your overheads to your product, you might end up, like I said, you run the risk of closing a certain product or discontinuing a product because you'd say it attracts too many costs. Whereas that might not be the case. It might be that you didn't identify the correct cost activity and the cost driver. Okay, so with that being said, let me ask you a true or false question. Okay, which one is true? Which one is false? That's the purpose of what I'm asking. Just a sec, guys. Okay, so I'm asking you to answer me the question. To answer the question, when using machine hours or apportioning manufacturing overheads, items with a low production run that requires a significant, oh, this is too mouthful, I'm sorry. Let me ask 2.1.2, it's too mouthful. Under activity, so a question, true or false, under activity-based costing, manufacturing overheads are sorted by activity, true or false?
That's true.
True.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Under activity-based, we always look at activity. It's in the name. Activity-based costing uses a plant-wide overhead rate to assign overheads. Is it true or false?
That's false.
That's false. Because plant-wide means blanket rate. We're just like using volume, or we're just using hours. That means that we're not looking at the certain activities. Last question. In traditional costing, overheads are apportioned to products based on volumes. Under traditional costing, overheads are apportioned to products based on volume-based measures.
That's true.
That's true. So that was like a summary of ABC, but the unit that we need to look at, it's your chapter 2 that goes into details as to the necessary steps that you need to look at as to how to answer your questions. So let's look at those on those steps so that we can close off today's session, and then we'll do a question next week. And which day is it? I'll try look. I forgot which day is it, but I'll just let you know before we close the session. So, as I've mentioned, every single thing that you do, there's certain steps or there's a certain framework that you go by, but you will learn more when you do the questions. So, under traditional method, the steps that you need to follow, it's 3 steps. Step 1, you need to be aware of costs that are accumulated in production and production departments and service departments. So identify the total cost that you need to incur. So know what's the total cost. And then step 2, the ones that are service related, you apportion. Cost of service departments are apportioned to production departments, and costs that are for production departments are apportioned to the various products. Okay. Then an overhead recovery rate is identified. So what they're basically saying is that you'll take your total cost. That's step 1. Step 2, identify what base you'll have to use. I said sometimes you use your volumes, sometimes you use sometimes they'll say it's hours, because it's very plant based. It's plant wide, it's more blanket rate. Then you have to identify your overhead recovery rate. Then that's what you will use to allocate to your specific product. Then activity base has certain steps. The first step for activity base, which is ABC, you have to identify the activity. First step, what is the activity? Then, after identifying the activity, what is the cost driver? So the activity would say quality inspection. That would be activity. Your cost driver would be number of inspections. Then step 2, what are the overheads that you need to assign to this activity? So what is the quality inspection cost? It's that 80,000 that we spoke about. And then step 3 is that during step 3, you need to know where are you supposed to assign this cost that you just identified. And then, so it will be a thing of, remember we were working with 80,000 for the total cost. You now look at all those products and say, okay, what are their number of inspections? That's the thing for the 222 in another one, something. You aggregate all of them. Then you take 80,000, you divide by that 80, then you get the recovery rate. Then the last one, that's where you allocate to those specific products. So the steps are simple, but you just have to have a way of, you must have a way of doing it. And it will help you with having a formula or having a way of doing your even with that being said, when you're attempting questions for ABC, you always have to, as much as you have a framework, always stick to the time. Because sometimes when you go by doing ABC, it might take you most of your time. Do it, find a way to do it as quickly as you can. Right? Because it's easier to do the steps, it's easier to follow, but I'd say it's a time trap because you can get into the thick of things to say, maybe they give you 5 products or they give you 2 or 3. For you to go about cost per unit and just identifying the cost driver, it could take a while, right? And also, with that being said, know what are the advantages and disadvantages. I've said, sometimes they ask you questions by calculating, sometimes they ask you questions to discuss. So they might say, what is the difference between ABC and traditional method? You need to be able to articulate it to a point where you get marks. Then another one, they'll ask you, what are the advantages and disadvantages of ABC? You need to be able to articulate, say, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of both methods. And that is within your textbook. So maybe let's look at the advantages. So advantages of using an ABC is that you get more reliable cost information that helps you to formulate policies, stuff like pricing. So more reliable cost information for pricing policy. But the disadvantage with ABC is that it's very time consuming and it's expensive. As you can think about it, like I said, it's a time trap because time consuming for you to be identifying the cost driver, identifying the activity, knowing what those cost drivers are. All those steps that I'll take, it's time consuming and it's expensive because you need to sometimes companies, they hire consultants to help them to identify those cost activities and cost drivers. I know at the company that I work for, a bank, they had consultants come and identify and help them with ABC because it's not as straightforward as possible. But the benefits, they help you to get accurate ways of allocating your cost, even though it's expensive. So this helps you also with doing short-term decision making. So yeah, because what you are allocating, it's accurate. Okay. So those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. Know them by heart, because as I've said, some questions they ask you theory questions. In terms of traditional method, it's simple to use. It's very easy because it's a blanket way of just allocating your cost. It's very simple. It's not as complex as ABC. So it's not costly to implement. If it's easy, that means it's simple and it's not costly. So, and it's easily understood, right? But your accuracy of allocating your overheads, it's very limited because products consume cost differently. So that is the theory for ABC. You need to now go and find out, be able to articulate what is the difference between traditional and ABC method. So what I'm trying to say is that always find a way to explain what you're doing and then be able to do the calcs and also do the theory in terms of ABC and traditional. So that's that for today. I don't want us to do a session. We've got like a few minutes left. I think what we'll do is that in the next session that we have, let me try see when is it. In the next class that we have, we then will start, yeah, it's Wednesday on the 24th. So it's 6:30. Let's do an ABC question. Let's start with that so that I can just see how far you are in terms of understanding the principles. And then we will then do job costing and then start process costing because your process costing is quite long. Okay. The homework that I will give you for ABC, maybe let's do that. For ABC, just hold a sec. It's in your learning unit 11. So please do the homework. If you guys don't do the homework, we will have to spend time within class to mark that homework. Yes, so this is a nice one. Please do question 5. Show you. That's your homework. It's on page, what page is this? It's exam question. I like doing exam questions. So it's page 184 in learning unit 11. And this would be your homework. Please do it. Question 5. You guys have your learning units, right? Next thing you'll say you don't have. You guys have your learning units, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
please do question 5. Exam question. I'll post it within the WhatsApp group. Yeah, do question 5 so that we can discuss it on Wednesday at 6:30.